this turns out, okay, because I just have this thing clipped here. Oh, let me know. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I like found footage horror, even if the camera can get shaky. Okay, let's just say it adds some realism, Even though they're still like carrying the camera if they're being if they're in a life-threatening situation, and you always have the cliche of like, why are they still hanging on to that? Anyway, when I watched the movie that I'm about to talk about, it moved to the top of my list for underrated horror gems. And I've only seen a couple people talk about it, but The Bay, released in 2012, is classified as a B horror, which give me B horror any day. I will eat it up. I know a lot of it can be slop, but I eat it up regardless. B horror, body horror, found footage, mockumentary, directed by Barry Levinson, who directed the 1988 film Rain Man, but more importantly, his voice appears in the critically acclaimed B movie as Barry B. Benson's father, Martin Benson. And something I really like about this film is the mockumentary style. So throughout the film, you get different footage. So there's the camera footage as well as medical room, police dash cam, conference call footage between the medical doctor, CDC, EPA, even Homeland Security makes an appearance. It gives you more of a comprehensive storyline than just the cameraman's footage, which I guess is something that makes this, stick out compared to other found footage films that I've seen. The premise follows a catastrophic 4th of July celebration in the coastal town of Claridge, Maryland, with the framing device of a journalism student named Donna and her cameraman capturing the events that unfold. This footage is shown through retrospective storytelling by Donna, presumably through Skype, because this predates the reign of Zoom. But she claims that the footage that they actually took that day was confiscated but re-uploaded to a website called govleaks.org, and I looked that up, and that is not a thing. But 2 weeks before the 4th of July event, they had the bodies of two oceanographers. IMDb gave them the names Sam and Jacqueline, even though I'm pretty sure their names are never said. And also, Sam was so annoying in all the footage because, so in the beginning of the film, it shows you the footage of their bodies. They were found dead and with various injuries on them, on their body cavity. But throughout the film, you see the footage that they took because it's kind of building up to, what happened. And so Sam, like, could not make his character more unlikable. He's just, I don't know if maybe this is just me being nitpicky, but I did not like their dynamic. In every scene that he's in, he's, he's like, hey, guys, like, yeah, you're portraying a scientist, but also he has this thing with Jacqueline where he's like, never can understand her, and she's French, but also at the same time, me as the viewer, I can understand what she's saying fine, but then he's over here like, he's like, normally, what? What?
Do you think this is an anomaly?
Do I think it's anomaly? What?
No, do you think it's normal?
No, oh, anomaly.
Anyway, that was just something that irked me. But they were measuring pollution levels in the bay. They were documenting the process of doing this, and that's why they have the footage that we will see progressively throughout the film. And when their bodies were found, like, they did, the cops and everything, they were saying it must be shark bites. But you hear them say that, oh, like, because, it's brackish water too, and they're like, oh, bull sharks move through here, but, these aren't areas where a bull shark would bite, and they don't necessarily really look exactly like shark bites. Um, and so that was the first indication that something was wrong. In Crabtown, Maryland, of course, crab is going to be a big part of their 4th of July celebration. They have Miss Crustacean, which that's kind of cool actually. But they have a crab eating contest where all the contestants just start throwing up.
Yeah.
Mm. This is a body horror, like I said, but sometimes the stuff like that is grosser to me than the actual body horror. Like if you watch The Substance, obviously prime example of body horror, but the scene where he's, eating the shrimp and he's just like gnawing on it's like getting everywhere, it's like flapping out of his mouth. No, I can't do it. Can't do. Honestly, that scene kind of almost made me think of a premise where you know how like they'll do seafood boil mukbangs. Is that how you say it? Where it's just like the biggest crab you've ever seen and like a baking bowl, like a bowl that you'd mix up cake batter in, but it's literally just filled with dip butter sauce for the crab legs. Made me think of a fun premise of like this almost seems like if the creatures could get revenge on their consumers. I don't know. That could be like an interesting idea. I'm pretty sure there's a meme somewhere online. There's a meme of a crab with a knife. A crab gets a hold of a knife. Kind of I don't know. The people in this town are having fun, but then all of a sudden they start showing up in the emergency room, and this medical doctor is gobsmacked by the amount of people, and he thinks that it must be some sort of, bacterial infection. He says they have a bunch of skin lesions, they have a bunch of boils. So he has to contact the CDC, and that's where we get kind of like conference call footage. But he doesn't really know. He doesn't know what he's dealing with. And you're probably wondering, well, what is he dealing with? Because I mentioned crabs, but it's not crabs. Close though. Sandworms on Letterbox put it best. Cute little water bugs celebrate 4th of July. The creatures in this film are actually little freaks known as isopods. Alright, isopods are an order of crustaceans which include both terrestrial, which y'all probably know as woodlice or roly-polies. Adorable, love them. But there's also aquatic varieties, which is what is included in this film. And, they can range from a few millimeters in size up to around 20 inches, which the 20-inch ones would belong to deep sea isopods.
Burrow its way into a submarine. The thing thought it was a dead whale.
What, are you making this up? This looks Photoshop.
And they're not, you might get freaked out by seeing an isopod of that caliber, but I still think they're pretty cute. So they have flattened bodies with segmented exoskeletons. So it almost reminds me of plated armor. I think they're cool. They have 2 pairs of antennae, 7 pairs of periopods, or their walking legs to let them scurry around. And then it tucked away in their anterior, so the back of them, they have 5 pairs of pleopods, which can act as swimming legs as well as gills in the aquatic isopods, but also act as lungs in terrestrial isopods, which I didn't know that. I had to research that. Don't get me wrong, I love a fictional monster as much as the next guy, but I think it was a pretty good call to use isopods. These specific cute little water bugs would be known as Samoetha exigua, a real parasitic isopod known as tongue-eating louse.
And, basically,
So, what does that mean? So parasitic isopods can stay attached to the external side of the fish or stay attached to the gills. Apparently, males will often stay just attached to the gill arches, while females, which tend to be larger, can attach to the tongue. Juveniles are small enough to enter a host through the gills, and with these isopods, their hosts are fish. As far as we know, they will enter through the gills, make their way to the mouth, just skitter on in there, and attach to the base of the tongue, where they will puncture the surrounding blood vessels in pursuit of feeding on fish blood, fish mucus. And as you can imagine, that just grip and that constant pressure will actually cause atrophy of the tongue. And so essentially, they'll replace the tongue. And this doesn't actually kill the fish. I mean, it sounds very uncomfortable, but the fish is still able to feed. Although you could say with this little guy replacing your tongue and feeding off of your, fluids, that you're gonna have some potential reduced growth or body mass. But they can still survive. So common fish that these isopods have been found in include snappers, croaker, sea trout, menhaden. I don't know how to say that one. I haven't heard of that before. So all the fish heads in the comments don't come for me. Grunts and grunions. So with that being said, these isopods do exist, but this is still a sci-fi film with some skin crawling exaggerations. So with that being said, isopod infestation in humans, the concept is definitely terrifying, but you can calm down. It's okay. There have been no real life cases ever reported of humans being used as hosts. So what exactly is going on in Claridge, Maryland? The mayor is depicted as the villain.
Stockman.
As we come to find out, he has spearheaded a large-scale chicken farm operation in the area as an economic boost, with egregious oversight of waste disposal. You just have tons and tons of chicken waste just haphazardly dumped into the bay. And I like how he's like, yeah, it's okay because I put up a desalination plant that filters water and nothing is getting through there. It's just like a big Brita. It's gonna be fine, guys. He catches a lot of flack for his flock.
Your chicken plants are putting chicken shit in my bay and they're killing.
It says that the desalination plant is filtering out everything toxic in the water. And he makes this whole point to like drink a cup of water too when someone is calling him out for it. Mind you, this film does actually highlight a problem in the Chesapeake Bay, which is decreased water quality from industry and agricultural runoff. So, wastewater treatment plants, manure, and fertilizer from agricultural operations. That coupled with high temperatures can create harmful algal blooms, which decrease the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water, and that's when you get these events of these mass fish kills, which is why there's news footage of mass fish kills included. Okay, so decreased water quality associated with the chicken waste is a prominent part of this film, but there's also another part that this film highlights, which I think is interesting. So to make the operation more efficient, to get more profit, they're beefing up the chickens, so to say, giving them growth hormones. these growth hormones are being fed to the chickens, and they are excreted in their waste. And so that is kind of the explanation we get for why these isopods are just suddenly really rapidly growing and proliferating in quantity because of of toxic soup. Basically, the Chesapeake Bay is toxic soup, and mutant isopods are being created. And there's a casual line dropped from the EPA correspondent where he's like, yeah, within the past decade, there was a small leak from a nuclear reactor, but we didn't know it was gonna hit. We thought we still had more time before it started causing problems here.
There was a small leak from a nuclear reactor in 2002.
And you don't want anyone.
Well, it's not under our regulations to test for radioactivity levels in water. Look, half the water in America probably has some leaks in it.
So, radioactive isopods. So the isopod larvae are small enough to fit through the desalination plant. So, that water that's kind of used as the town's water supply, and people that are just yucking it up in the water, swallowing a bunch of water, end up getting infected with these isopods. Alright, so like in most films where you have a sort of like parasite in a human, it's depicted as parasitoid, which in real life are associated with parasitic insects, where their immature life stages develop within or attach to other insects, and eventually they kill the host when they keep developing. And a common example that I saw of this was a parasitoid wasp. You might be familiar with this little independent film called Alien. Um, but there's a scene in that where the alien, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie released decades ago, but it pops out of the guy's stomach. And so that's kind of like parasitoid. It eventually kills the host. So that's how these isopods are portrayed. They're growing they're growing in size, and there's a lot of them in your body, and that's what gives me like the bump lesions they have. It's just like thinking about being infested with all these isopods, and they have to make their way out of your body. So that's why those oceanographers had the weird shark bites almost. It's like exit wounds from these isopods, which is very scary actually. Ultimately, it appears that everyone that went to the hospital succumbed to their injuries, and I think they even mentioned that the doctor ended up dying later that night. And Donna explains that a gaggle of hazmat suits came in, followed with the National Guard, and they quarantined the town. And then the isopods were killed off because they dumped a massive amount of chlorine in the channel. So they killed the isopods, but all the other aquatic life, whatever. There's a little figure at the end that's like, oh, the Chesapeake Bay remains 40% lifeless. Donna tries to answer questions the audience might have at the end, wrapping it up where she's like, yeah, for some reason not everyone was affected, even if they drink water. And it just can't really be explained like why. She ends up saying that the town settled with the government for an undisclosed amount of money to be kind of hush hush type situation, and that they just attributed the whole incident to unseasonably high water temperatures. Poor Donna, dude. Like, if in real life you're just some journalism student being like, well, it's time to talk about the crab eating contest and, this little coastal town for 4th of July, and then all of a sudden it turns into Isopod Massacre. I liked her. I thought her performance was really good in this. Like she even mentions, she makes a joke and she'll be like, "Sorry, I have to use humor to cope." And I'm like, I think it's pretty realistic how she portrayed the character. And I think it's not far off of how they portrayed the mayor with severe oversight, of the uh, agricultural operation, cutting corners basically, which, is a thing that happens. So obviously this movie isn't 100% realistic. If it was, it wouldn't, like, the movie wouldn't exist. But I appreciate um, the realism that they tried to put in, and it's one of the only environmental horrors I feel like. I mean, there are more, there are definitely more out there, but the list is pretty slim. But I think it's one of the better environmental horrors, I'd say. But yeah, let me know what you think. I don't really know how to end a video, so